Hi, and welcome to the CAFMA Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag, and back with me today, after a long absence, Assistant Chief John Feddema.
I don't think it was that long.
Well, we were both gone.
Yeah. We
missed last week. And, oh, by the way, next week, I'm going to need either you, Dave, or Cody, and you can pick.
Perfect.
I'm going to leave it to you because you're here now. One of you, I need you to do the podcast, and I need someone to write the review because I'm going to be tied up at the AFCA President's Forum all next week in Prescott.
Very nice, and I think I'll be helping teach at the Captain's Academy, so I too will be tied up. So Cody and Dave, you're up.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's good. We can divide it, and I don't care which one does which, just one of them. So we've got a point. We're going to have to talk to them because last week I forgot to mention that, so the podcast didn't get done. And I wrote the review in between, running back and forth between Mesa and the Capitol while facilitating a program.
Nice.
And I have to say that was kind of a pain.
Yeah.
But it's all right. Shout out to Jonah and Eric. If you look at how the room's coming along here, great design. Eric did some fantastic work. And, of course, Jonah, the lighting, I think it looks really cool from what I can see. So things are coming along. We're getting more professional, John, is what it is.
All right. The room is getting more professional. I'll agree with there, yeah.
Okay. All right. And, normally I would have my CAFMA mug on the desk for those on YouTube. This week I have my Rockstar Energy drink, and I was driven to do that. I recently finished the book Sea Stories by General McGraven, and it was a fascinating book about his life and things, but he talked about being in Iraq and Afghanistan and living off of energy drinks. And I'm like, if a general can do it, a fire chief can sit on a YouTube thing and drink a Rockstar.
There you go.
So, exciting news. I'm going to start with bad news first, though, John, and then we're going to go to exciting news.
Nice.
The bad news first is there was a bill that the PFFA is running. It's HCR 2004. Monday, it was supposed to be discussed in committee, brought for a vote, and unfortunately the bill got killed immediately. Now that bill was related to fire district funding and certainly would have had a significant impact on us as well as our taxpayers, and not taxpayers in a bad way. It would have had an impact in helping us control property taxes moving forward. The bill is not completely dead. The PFFA is working very hard along with our other partners, the Arizona fire districts and fire chiefs, and we're trying to find another vehicle to revive the bill on the House side. Nuclear option is, try the Senate, but hopefully we'll find a way on the House side. So that was the bad news of the day. I guess the other bad news of the day was it was an extremely long day, but in the end we can put a W in the win column for us for House Bill 2609, which is ambulance reform. Yeah. It was voted out of committee on Monday in the House, a vote of 12-1-1. So 12-4, 1 against, 1 voting absent. So that sounds like a great big win, but there was a lot of chatter at the very end as each member explained their vote. And while I think we did a good job of framing this as a regulatory issue that is impacting the entire state and a statute that needs to be updated because it creates roadblocks, AMR was the last to speak, and their lobbyist was the last to speak. And they didn't do horrible in trying to frame this as, no, this isn't a statewide bill. This is a Prescott area issue only, which is not the case.
Yeah. No, it's tough when it's this is not just our challenge that we're facing. And I think that's what, you've done a good job with. And I think, a lot of the information we're trying to get out there is this is affecting a lot of other areas. And I think the reform is good. It's needed. It's a long time coming, and if they don't do it now, when are they going to do it? So I think hopefully that will continue forward.
Well, and we have really everyone on board in the state, seemingly. Sure. Arizona Ambulance Association, who represents all of the ambulance, or most of the ambulance services in the state, with the exception of 2, AMR and Healthcare Innovations. Healthcare Innovations is a really small operation out of southern Arizona, who's usually in lockstep with AMR. But everybody else, including Priority Ambulance, has been working closely with us on this bill, and even amendments to the bill and the amendments the governor's office provided. So we've got them. We have the Arizona Fire Chiefs. We have the Arizona Fire Districts. We're working on the hospitals are signing in. And I spoke with the sheriff yesterday, and he's talking to his association. Sure. Ran into Sheriff Lamb, who's out of the Yuma area, on Monday down at the Capitol, and mentioned this bill to him and what it does. And he said, that would be awesome because our deputies are waiting an hour for an ambulance to arrive.
Well, I think that just goes to highlight it's not just our issue.
No.
And again, I think the reform is necessary to continue to help those smaller communities make decisions for themselves on how they want to support the service.
Right. And my testimony on Monday focused on the regulatory portion of it. Yep. To try to make this or separate us as much as possible from it, I introduced myself as the president of the Arizona Fire Chiefs Association, not CAFMA's chief. I did not wear a uniform. I had a sport coat and tie that was not, I was unmarked.
Sure.
And I didn't use any examples from the area.
Yeah.
I explained why the regulation is overly burdensome right now, how it prevents other applicants from being able to provide services.
Yep.
But as soon as I was done with that, the committee apparently knows who I am. And so they started firing off questions for probably 15, 20 minutes. And I think I was able to just keep it framed, according to other people who watched, as a statewide issue. Yes, sure. This is specific in our area, but here's this. Up after me, we had Baby Lily was there. She was awesome, and
cool.
her grandma.
Nice.
And, I joked about we should just set Baby Lily on the podium so she could just look at them all. That's exactly what
nice.
Lorinda did. She was fantastic. And then a gentleman named Sean from here was down there. Following them, though, was AMR. It was a regional manager, John Valentine, and who we all know. And it was interesting, and it was pointed out by more than one person that as he was holding up this contract and shaking it in the air, which has nothing to do with regulation and reform, saying, we offered Chief Freitag this contract. He said in there, we offered Chief Freitag this contract and told him that if he would sign it, this would be an easy path to getting the CON for CAFMA. But if he doesn't sign it, there's going to be a lengthy battle. And a lot of folks pointed out that if you look up the definition of coercion,
sure,
that fits.
Well, and it's a shame that our lengthy battle will be based on what they choose to do.
Oh, absolutely. And so I'm writing it in the review this week, and I want to make sure I have it right. Definition of coercion, according to Oxford Dictionary, and it's Oxford. I mean, that's prestigious.
You Google it, yeah. I mean,
yeah. Well, I did Google it, but
sure.
Oxford popped up. That's a college or university in
somewhere,
England.
Sure.
Jonah?
It's in Oxford, which is in England. Yes.
It's in Oxford, so it's in England. It says coercion, the practice of persuading someone to do something by using force or threats. And then here's the interesting part. The example they used is our problem cannot be solved by any form of coercion, but only by agreement.
There you go.
That's interesting. I think that means that you're better off working together. And had AMR actually sat down at the table with us over the last 6 or 7 years, and had a meaningful conversation, maybe that would have happened. But offering a contract that is not of any benefit to our citizens and would actually harm them because it would undermine priority ambulance, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And let's use priority ambulance as an example right now. So we're talking about how the current statute is really a roadblock to anyone trying to get into the market. And our bill's trying to streamline that process. When I say ours, I mean the fire service in the state. So priority ambulance, and this is what got to some of the committee members and really has had an impact when I'm talking to some of the community. Priority submitted their application 2 years ago to obtain a license for up here. And that 2 years, they've spent nearly $2 million. As of today, they still don't have an answer as to whether or not they are able to operate.
Yeah.
Does that seem like an efficient system to you?
Not so much. And within that 2 years, obviously, we've seen a substantial increase in call volume. And obviously, with that call volume increase, we haven't seen any adjustment by AMR in this area to respond to that increase in call volume, which was leading, I think, significantly to our ongoing issue. Having another provider in here, I think, certainly would have helped alleviate that, but obviously that isn't possible under the current legislation.
No. And the other interesting part to their testimony was at one point, and I'm not sure they meant to say this, I mean, I certainly wouldn't say it personally, but they said the statute was specifically written to create monopolies in rural areas of Arizona to ensure adequate ambulance transport coverage.
Sure.
Does that make sense to you?
Not so much. And obviously, there's when you look at the private agency, obviously there's a profit, in order to stay in business. Sure. That makes sense. But as those smaller communities continue to grow, there's no options for them. So the monopoly at that point is not just providing a service and enabling in service, it's actually preventing any change in the service. And at that point, you're under the control of that monopoly, which is not good.
Well, and I think we've seen with the failure of rural, and even when Scottsdale moved away from rural, I got a little more on that story recently. So Scottsdale, historically, the city of Scottsdale had been covered by a rural metro private agency. And I was talking to a former Scottsdale police officer the other day and the fire chief, current fire chief. And during the rural metro days, they had engines that had maybe 3 people on them, if they could muster 3 people. Yeah. And the reason for that was, hey, look, the more resources I put on this equipment, the more costly the service is, the less profit as a private company I generate. And that seems to be the difficulty of, because I certainly understand free market.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, your sister owns a company and brother-in-law, they have to generate revenue. I totally get that. But when you start putting profit or injecting a profit margin into emergency services, you do tend to start seeing a problem sometimes. There are some companies, and I think from what I'm hearing about Priority under the banner of Maricopa and the Valley, they are much better at ensuring coverage. They're way more transparent, and they're more willing to work with as partners in the system. And I think that's great, because if you look at inter-facility, hospital to hospital, that's dollar for dollar, man. That's where money is.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And as emergency responders, we want nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
Nothing. So freeing up the private ambulances to spend more time in what would typically be considered their business model, in my opinion, and allowing a governmental agency like CAFMA to supplement on the 911 side, it frees them up to generate more profit. Do you want to run the call that generates 49 cents on the dollar, or you want to run the call that generates a dollar for dollar?
Yeah.
I'm not in business, but if I was,
makes sense.
Yeah, dollar for dollar seems better. So it's a good partnership there. Some of the other information that came out, and I want to talk about this because as I go through the testimony from Monday, I'm trying to prepare for what's our next step, right? Sure. We have to go to the Rules Committee. I don't think we testify in rules. There's no amendments in rules. So all of the amendments we have to be introduced on the floor. Well, we don't get to speak once this goes to the floor. So what message do we have to send to representatives around the state of Arizona between now and when that bill gets to the floor to counter the message that AMR is trying to put out about the bill? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So one of the questions that was asked of AMR's lobbyist was, did you have a stakeholders meeting in advance of this bill being dropped? And the simple answer from me and you is yes.
Yeah.
The answer from the lobbyist was a little more muddled, maybe. I don't know if muddled's the right word. Muddied the waters. How's that? Yes, we had a stakeholders meeting, but according to AMR, they didn't know that this was going to be a stakeholders meeting regarding the bill. what they said was, we thought this was simply a meeting about the issues that the Prescott area is saying they're having.
Sure.
The difficulty I have with that, John, is that they came to the table with the Healthcare Innovations, or whatever the name of that group is, a team of lobbyists for that group and AMR. And I find it difficult to believe that if you're just going to have a conversation about the Prescott area, that you would need another company who's not involved to be in the room and a team of lobbyists.
Either way, that sounded like they were prepared.
Yeah. I mean, does it sound to you like they thought this? I mean, just opinion, understanding who they were bringing to the table. Does it sound to you like they thought they were coming in for a meeting just about Prescott?
If they were just coming for a meeting just about Prescott, obviously they were preparing to try to squash any other discussion. So obviously it appears from the outside they knew what they were getting into.
I would think so. And I think the difficulty is that we found out what they were coming to the table with. And so we made contact with other fire chiefs for the Arizona Fire Chiefs Association, and they showed up. Now, what the answer that AMR had to that was, yeah, but those were fire chiefs. Other ambulance groups were not present.
Sure.
Not so fast. The president of the Arizona Ambulance Association was present for that stakeholders meeting. And the Arizona Ambulance Association represents a majority of the ambulance services in the state. Two notably are not members of the Ambulance Association, AMR and the Healthcare Solutions people. So in my estimation, if you have the president of the Arizona Ambulance Association, and that association has said we support this bill, it seems to me that there was ample ambulance representation in the stakeholders meeting.
It would appear so, yes.
And we had Representative Burgess, we had President Fan, and we had a representative from the governor's office in the meeting who offered amendments as well. I think they knew what they were coming to. They didn't expect us to counter with the people that we had in the room, and that caught them off guard because they were pretty angry about that, and that's sad.
Perfect.
For them. I'm sorry you feel that way.
Yeah.
Not really. So that's one thing that we have to answer. That said, we're trying to schedule another stakeholders meeting to satisfy committee members' concerns that there wasn't enough input.
Sure.
So we are hopefully scheduling that next week, but it's kind of difficult. Could be the following week, but we're going to get that done. So that was one of the things they said. Another thing they said is the reason the ALJ needs to be in there is because it takes the politics out of the decision making. My understanding is that if you're hired at the state, let's say for the Bureau of EMS, that you're hired in as an apolitical person who's supposed to have an expertise in this area and be able to evaluate information and make a decision.
Yeah.
Does that
seems reasonable?
Does it? Now here, let's say we have a personnel problem. Okay. Do we ignore the personnel problem and add additional layers so we can continue to ignore the personnel problem, or do we deal with the personnel issue?
I would hope that we're dealing with the personnel issue, yes.
Well, one would hope. My response to taking the politics out is there's not supposed to be politics in the Bureau. So if that's the problem, I think the state should deal with the personnel issue and not add this very expensive and time-consuming layer of an administrative law judge at the front end of an applicant's application process. Understand, we didn't pull the ALJ out. So the administrative law judge is still there, but not until the end. And I think that's important to understand because every department in the state, with the exception of the Bureau of EMS, the director makes the decision. They evaluate, they make the decision. If someone has a problem with it, then it's appealable to the administrative law judge. The difference between in the beginning and at the end is that at the beginning, the applicant has to prove that there's sufficient need for the for them to have the CON. At the end of it, if you transition that to the end, now the complainant has to prove that the director's decision was incorrect in some way.
Yeah.
So the burden of proof becomes on them and not the applicant. Personally, I think it's good to flop that.
Sure.
If you're a transport company that's not providing services and you have the ability just to run a roadblock and the deep pockets to pay for all the legal fees, little people can't get in. And I don't mean any offense about little people. I'm just saying smaller companies or agencies can't fight that. So you've got that. And then they said that, well, you've got to have the ALJ because your application is so small. It's tiny. And therefore, there's no way the department can determine need based off of that application, John. It's just too small. How many pages was ours when it got turned in? Do you remember?
No idea.
450.
Thank you.
So they even made the hand gesture. It's like this. I know 450 pages doesn't fit there. It's like this. And I mean, the questions are substantive questions. They're pretty deep.
Yep.
And you have to have a financial analysis and how you're going to, everything has to be in this. And then after the substantive review of those 450 pages, they send you another 3, 4, 15 pages of bullet points with more questions.
Yeah.
And then you answer those. And then if you don't answer those to their satisfaction, they send you more. And you continue through this process until the Bureau has determined they have enough information to determine need, yet they can't determine need because you have to go to court first. Yeah, that's how that works. So the answer to, well, how could the Bureau figure anything out if they don't have any information because the application's so small is, I don't have my yellow flag, but we have the ones I gave you. It's kind of a, when they throw them in football.
Sure.
Right. I'm not going to say what we call it, but I'm going to throw the flag and say, no, that's not correct. There is ample information in there to determine whether need exists or not, and for the Bureau to make the determination. So that argument is a non-starter. Let's see, what were some of the other things that they said? We had the coercion part we talked about, application short we talked about, court proceedings we talked about. So I think we covered a lot of what was in that committee meeting.
Sure.
And so, as I said, our next steps are really ensuring that other agencies around the state are contacting their elected officials so that they understand this is not a Quad City specific issue.
Correct. Yep.
The fire chief of Lake Havasu now has permission to come out more publicly.
Good.
Because municipal fire chiefs have a little different framework they have to stay within in rails than we do. Yep. Their rails are like this, and ours are pretty wide open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously it always all depends on the board and the support from the board, but obviously our board has been very supportive of you continuing this process and kind of highlighting the issue that we're facing, because ultimately we're not able to satisfy this with anything operationally. We've tried, we're filling the gaps to try to get folks to the hospital, but this is solved at your level, and obviously you're out there doing the fight, which is good.
Yeah, and it's taken everybody a lot of time, because the fact of the matter is when I'm having to run down to the Capitol now, you're having to pick up the slack. And Dave and Cody, and even today, I was in before we started recording, I was supposed to be here at 3:30. I was in a community meeting with some folks on this very issue. It was supposed to be a 30-minute meeting, and it went for an hour and 45 minutes. But I understand the importance of your time. I also understand the importance of the community's time, and their desire to and willingness to help is vitally important.
We need to capitalize on that, yes.
We absolutely do. And so I apologize to you and Jonah for being late. At the same time, I appreciate the fact that those community folks are concerned enough to spend time with us. and talk about the issues. So when I was at Sunup Rotary, I didn't talk about this issue at all. I just talked about CAFMA and how great we are.
Perfect.
Yeah. Anytime you get a chance.
Yeah, it's a good topic.
But then we went to CARTA, and there were only 3 Rotarians that had time to go out there, but we went to CARTA and went on a tour, which was great. Captain Merrill, as always, did a fantastic job.
Good.
Showing people around. But before they left, one of the gentlemen said, "Tell me about the ambulance issues." And perfect. Here's an opening, appropriate opening. So gave him a 30,000-foot view. Here's what we're seeing in the city of Prescott as well as in our area, because Prescott's crews are really getting frustrated.
Yes, absolutely.
You spoke with Chief Knapp today, and
I think they're facing the same things. They're dealing with the same level zeros. They're dealing with the same challenges of trying to get folks to the hospital, and the crews are having to make the decision: do we have an ambulance or not? They're having to go on the radio and get a hold of PRCC and ask, have we been assigned an ambulance? If they haven't, then they know there's already trouble for when they get on scene. So they're having to deal with not only the call, whatever's transpiring on that scene, but also navigate. Do we have an ambulance? Do we not have an ambulance? Do we need to get the rescues for us? For them, they're obviously using the battalion rig to help do that. And it's obviously a broad issue that we're all facing right now.
Yeah. No, it's difficult. So, and the gentleman that asked the question, to his credit, after I explained it to him, he expressed his frustration because he just went through this recently with a friend of his. And he said the gentleman, his health was degrading fairly quickly, needed to get him to a hospital. He gave kudos to the ambulance crew that responded, or not the ambulance crew, I'm sorry, the fire crew that responded, because the fire crew arrived and they're like, "Sir, I'm sorry to tell you this, but we don't have an ambulance and we can't get one." And so the crew stayed there and worked with this gentleman through a process of figuring out, how do we get this gentleman to the hospital? Is there another way to treat this? But that took that crew a lot of time.
Oh, yeah.
And he said he was very appreciative of what the fire crew did and their care and compassion that they showed. Very frustrated with the fact that he called for emergency medical response. And what he got back was, there are no ambulances to send to you.
Sure.
And he never got one.
Yeah.
I understand the frustration, and that's why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Some can argue our methods currently.
Sure.
But I don't think you can argue with the results. And that's what I was trying to explain to the folks from the community today, is that they said, what's different between today and here? And do we have any W's in our column? And we said we do. Because of what the community is doing, the governor is inserting his staff into this problem. Good. Are we going to get the temporary authority? No. Sure. It's just not going to happen. But we may actually get substantive legislative changes because of this. DHS and the Bureau have had to back off of investigating us for transports. That's a win. Monday was a win. Now we still have, we've crossed that hurdle. Now we have a gauntlet still to run.
Sure.
We have momentum. We have support. More ambulance transport services around the state are saying, what can we do to help?
Cool.
And so we're letting them know. But I know we talk about this issue a lot on the podcast, and you have to tolerate me.
I just sit here and smile and nod.
Yeah.
Smile and nod.
But, it honestly, it helps me to be able to talk about this here and with you, because when I go interact with elected officials, I have a better presentation by having practiced it. And have I upset some folks with a certain company or their lobbyist? And the answer to that is yes, unequivocally. Yes, I have. And I'm sorry they feel that way.
Sure.
That's too bad. Moving on.
Moving forward.
So, John, with that, we're going to close out this week. I do want to get back with you because you just came back from Mighty Oaks, so maybe in a couple weeks, I'd really like to sit down and talk about your most recent experience in Mighty Oaks, why that's important, and maybe talk about more behavioral health challenges for emergency responders.
Yep.
Does that work?
Yep.
Awesome. Jonah, thank you as always, sir. Appreciate it. To all of you out there, thank you for watching or listening. Remember to hit the like and subscribe button, and we will see you next week. Well, we won't.
Yeah,
Somebody
no,
will.
I'm not coming.
Neither am I. I've got stuff to do.